Let's get this straight. He trashed Mexicans, war heroes, and talked about his dong in a debate, but we're...
How did you feel hearing that?
Well, obviously it was very offensive. However, I think it's totally irrelevant. I mean, it was so long ago, and I do believe that most men will talk about women in ways that they would never talk about publicly. And of course, if they would have known that they were being recorded, there's no doubt in my mind the conversation would have been totally different. Nobody is perfect. Here's the issues. Last night in that debate, they defined their issues. They lined the marks in the sand. Number one, Roe v. Wade. Okay, Hillary Clinton doesn't care about murdering babies, dismembering abortions. That's okay with her. Okay.
Wait a second.
Religious freedom.
We're talking. I appreciate you talking about substance, and that is important, Vicki. But we're talking about locker room conversation.
Yes.
My question was about: is it okay that a man who wants to be the president of the free world is bragging and admits to it? And yes, he's apologized.
Yeah. Well,
to
that's wrong.
assault.
Okay. Yes, but that is wrong. Absolutely. But here's the thing, he's not running to be the Pope. Look at the culture of our country. Everybody knew he had strip clubs, but still the millions of people chose him to be the nominee. I mean, this is the kind of person that needs to lead our country. God can use anybody. He used the harlots. And that's the thing. It's all about what God can do. God can do this. God can use this man.
But you know, the things that we've
it's all a part of it.
From this adult man who is running to be president of the United States, millions of children heard that, boys and girls. And boys may take their cues from this guy who wants to be our president and behave in accordance with...
Okay, but here's the thing. When Bill Clinton was president, my children came home from school and they had no idea it was actually called the Oval Office. They thought it was called the Oral Office because of the talk in the elementary schools.
Okay,
Bill Clinton educated my children at a much younger age than I wanted to.
But Vicki, Bill Clinton isn't running for president right now.
Exactly.
We're talking about Hillary Clinton.
No, but his wife is. His wife is. And they are a pair. The two are one.
Overnight, protesters across the country denouncing Donald Trump's victory. Violent demonstrators seen here in Portland, threatened with tear gas after allegedly throwing burning objects at officers.
No, it's being shot in the air.
Investigators saying one protester was hurt in a shooting that broke out during the protest. The injuries not life-threatening. In other cities, Philadelphia, Dallas, and Miami, thousands marching mainly peacefully against the president-elect.
What makes you rally with all these people?
Because Donald Trump ain't right. He speaks hate. Everything come out of his mouth is hate.
What is it that you do not like about Donald Trump?
He don't talk to the people right. How you gonna come on TV trying to be president talking about retarded people and I'm talking about bad about the women and building a wall? These people over here trying to make a decent life. It's supposed to be America. So we're supposed to live free.
Mr. Trump, how does your house compare to the White House?
Okay, we'll stop you there. This is the White House. This is Trump's house. So's this, so's this. So get ready for the conceited, my house is a so much better answer.
The White House is very special. I have nice houses, but the White House is very special. It represents so much.
Wow, good answer.
Wow, unfreaking believable. Donald Trump, President-elect Trump, talks about making America great again and bringing more businesses and keeping more businesses inside of America. But yet, just because his wife has decided not to go to the White House, the whole area of that downtown Manhattan or Fifth Avenue, Manhattan, business is being hurt because she's there, because she decides not to move to the White House. So the businessman is hurting businesses around the area that his apartment is in. What's the irony in that? And trash is being piled up and all of these things, security checks and bag checks. It sounds like the security in that area is more strict than the airports, right? Now, really, just because she decides not to move to the White House when, in fact, you are the president, will be the president, you can get homeschooling, you can get personal tutors to come to the White House, right? Or hell, use Air Force One and transport your son back and forth to school.
Well, today, President-elect Donald Trump joined Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in calling on the Obama administration to veto a UN Security Council resolution that would demand a halt to new Israeli settlements in Palestinian territory. This comes as a vote on that resolution has now been delayed. A draft of the resolution was circulated by Egypt. It was supposed to be voted on today. Prime Minister Netanyahu took a page from Mr. Trump's playbook last night. He used Twitter to express his displeasure, and he wrote, "The U.S. should veto the anti-Israel resolution at the UN Security Council on Thursday." Mr. Trump took to Facebook and supported Netanyahu's message, writing, quote, "The resolution being considered at the United Nations Security Council regarding Israel should be vetoed, as the United States has long maintained peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians will only come through direct negotiations between the parties and not through the imposition of terms by the United Nations. This puts Israel in a very poor negotiating position and is extremely unfair to all Israelis." Special advisor to president of J Street is in Washington and joins us now. Alan, I want to get your take on this delay of this UN resolution. What do you think is behind this?
Well, we actually don't know. There's a lot of machinations, as usual, at the UN. And it remains to be seen what's behind it and whether the delay is permanent or temporary. But what I think we can say is that, contrary to what Trump said in his tweet, we would regard a balanced UN resolution that criticizes the settlements but also criticizes Palestinian incitement as being very useful. And we would not advise that the United States veto such a resolution.
Alan, we know that President Obama, one of his big foreign policy goals coming in 8 years ago was the creation of a Palestinian state, something he's not going to see when he leaves in January. So if the White House, which has declined to say how it would have voted on the resolution, if they, despite vetoing similar provisions in recent years, what would the message have been sent from this administration if they had let the resolution actually pass?
Well, again, I don't know that the resolution is dead, and I don't know that the last word on this has been spoken. But I think that the administration wants to lay down a marker as to some of the barriers to a two-state solution, some of the things that have prevented progress toward a two-state solution, and certainly the Israeli settlements, which are constantly expanding and have never stopped, and are bringing hundreds of thousands of people to live in the occupied territories, are one of the main obstacles to peace. Not the only one, obviously, but one of the main obstacles. And likewise, the Palestinian incitement, denial of Jewish links to the land of Israel and to Jerusalem are also a barrier. And this resolution would have addressed both of those.
Earlier this week, Alan, Trump nominated David Friedman, a supporter of settlements, to be his ambassador to Israel. He actually compared your group, J Street, to Jews who worked for the Nazis during World War II. Pretty strong words there. Do you think this means this is the end of any sort of possibility of a two-state solution under a Trump administration?
Well, first of all, we should separate this particular individual and his hateful speech, which we think disqualifies him from representing our nation in Israel. We should separate that from what the Trump administration will actually do, because he's not yet in power. There are worrying signs. Trump has talked about moving the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, which we think would be a very incendiary move, and it could set off a lot of violence around the region, and it would really destroy the U.S. position as an honest broker between the Israelis and the Palestinians. But again, we want to take a bit of a wait-and-see attitude and see what happens. But in terms of Mr. Friedman, we really think that this man who is peddling incredibly offensive kind of speech. I myself am the son of a Holocaust survivor, and I find that this accusation that because I'm in favor of a Palestinian state, because I'm in favor of a just peace between Israelis and Palestinians, this makes me like a collaborator with the Nazis. I find that incredibly, incredibly offensive.
So, Alan, if he does become ambassador to Israel, how do you counter that, and how do you continue pushing forward, which J Street has always articulated, for a two-state solution?
Well, first of all, he has to be confirmed by the Senate, and it means he has to win a majority of the votes in the Senate. And so we'll be fighting very hard to persuade senators, the Republicans and Democrats, that this is not the right man to represent our nation. A person who peddles hate speech should not be, and divides our community, should not be our representative in Israel. But going forward, we will continue to press with our allies in Israel, with a majority of Israelis, with a majority of Palestinians, who the polls say still favor a two-state solution, because it is the only way to end the conflict. And any other kind of policy is a policy that continues the conflict. And I think that that is a policy that will result in just suffering for Israelis, suffering for Palestinians, instability in the region, all kinds of negative consequences.
We know that President Obama and Prime Minister Netanyahu had a pretty rocky relationship the past 8 years. What's your sense of the relationship with Mr. Trump? We know that they do like each other. Mr. Netanyahu does like Trump. But do you see any sort of conflict or any divide between the two?
Again, it's hard to say. One of the things about Mr. Trump is that he can be very, very unpredictable. He can go off on the slightest thing. So, you know, a relationship that's based on personal chemistry, but where the interests diverge, is not one that's likely to last. A lot of leaders have come to power of countries that want to be pro-Israel and have found it very difficult to deal with Netanyahu because of this constant settlement drive that he adopts. And I think that Mr. Trump will see, as he enters office, that there is no other solution to this conflict other than negotiations between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and that being just one-sidedly behind Israel, behind everything that the Israeli government of Netanyahu does, is a recipe ultimately for instability and for not making progress. And if he wants to make a deal, he says he's the great deal maker, he'll have to find a different way of moving.
Well, the Obama administration has moved to formally end the National Registry Program for immigrants from majority Muslim countries, known as the National Security Entry-Exit Registration System, or NSEERS. Obama's move comes only one day after Donald Trump appeared to reiterate his pledge to reinstate this very registry when answering a question from a reporter outside his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida Wednesday. The reporter was asking Trump about Monday's attack on a Christmas market in Berlin, Germany, which left 12 people dead. In response, Trump said, quote, "You've known my plans all along, and they've proven to be right, 100% correct," unquote. Trump first spoke about creating a registry while campaigning for president.
Should there be a database system that tracks the Muslims here in this country?
There should be a lot of systems beyond database. I mean, we should have a lot of systems. And today you can do it. But right now we have to have a border, we have to have strength, we have to have a wall, and we cannot let what's happening to this country happen.
But that's something your White House would like to implement.
Oh, I would certainly implement that.
Well, on Thursday, the Department of Homeland Security submitted a rule change in efforts to dismantle the legal framework for the registry, apparently in order to prevent Trump from reviving it. In a statement, a spokesperson for the Department of Homeland Security called the program, quote, redundant, inefficient, and provided no increase in security, unquote.
The registry was created after the September 11th attacks. Under the program, more than 10,000 Muslims were deported, tens of thousands were spied on. The Department of Homeland Security abandoned the program 10 years later in 2011 after massive pressure from civil liberties groups. Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach, who was then working inside George W. Bush's Justice Department. He's now a member of Donald Trump's transition team. In November, he accidentally revealed his proposed strategic plan for the Department of Homeland Security, which includes reinstating the registry and imposing an ideological, quote, extreme vetting, unquote, test for immigrants seeking keen to enter the United States. Kobach revealed these plans when he was photographed carrying documents outlining this strategic plan into a meeting with Donald Trump.
That this was a program that was controversial from the start under the Bush administration. People had been looking to scrap it within DHS since 2006, and it had been abandoned, as you know, by the Obama administration. It was obsolete. It was not a value add to national security at all, but what it had achieved was fear-mongering, scaring people in these communities, driving families apart, deportations. It was ineffective and counterproductive.
But what would dismantling it effectively mean at this point, since it really hasn't been used now for several years?
What dismantling it means is that for the Trump administration to come in, it's going to be that much harder for them to start a new Muslim registry program. So what we have basically is that the edifice or the foundation for a Muslim registry has been taken out of the agency's rules. And in order to bring it back in, the Trump administration is going to have to start a whole new process. That doesn't mean that they can't do it. And that even if they do try to do it, it will be challenged on constitutional grounds. We are far more ready for this fight than we were back in 2002 when this all started with the Bush administration. But what the Obama administration has done is dismantle the infrastructure. They've also sent a really important signal that racial and religious profiling, that's not the norm. That's not something we just accept as a country.